At 2 a.m. on Tuesday local time in the Gaza Strip, Washington inaugurated a new era in world politics. This was the moment Israel timed its attacks on dozens of targets in the enclave to coincide with Suhoor, the pre-dawn meal eaten by Muslims in preparation for a day of fasting. The timing was designed to inflict maximum civilian casualties as families across Gaza gathered to eat and pray during the holy month of Ramadan. Even if they had little or no food to consume, the mass simultaneous attacks on 100 separate locations achieved their objective, surpassing in one night all the other acts of wanton butchery by Israeli forces during the 18-month war on Gaza. More than 400 Palestinians were killed, including more than 170 children, according to Gaza health officials. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu sought and got the green light from Washington before launching these attacks. US President Donald Trump thus signaled a new era in global affairs by giving his consent for a wave of attacks that broke every aspect of the ceasefire deal signed in the presence of international guarantors. In one act, Trump turned the West his nation claims to lead into the Wild West. From this moment on, no treaty, ceasefire, or international agreement that the US signs is worth the paper it's printed on. A US president who persuaded the credulous imams of Michigan that he was now a man of peace now uses the label Palestinian as a political slur against Jewish democratic politicians. The president who vowed to stop all wars has launched or permitted airstrikes in Yemen, Gaza, Lebanon and Syria simultaneously, and is promising that all hell will break loose on Iran if it doesn't submit to his demands. A US president who told the families of the hostages he would do everything in his power to get them back alive has allowed Israel to effectively apply its Hannibal directive to the 24 who, before Tuesday morning's attacks, were still believed to be living. If Israel behaves like this, what incentive does it now give Hamas to keep the remaining hostages alive? For Netanyahu, the timing of the attacks was everything, for quite different reasons. On Tuesday, he was due to appear in court on multiple corruption charges, which, as the case progresses, is tightening the political noose round his neck. The renewed war gave him the excuse to tell the court he could not attend. It's also no coincidence that Tuesday's bombardment comes just before a key budget vote, with ultra-Orthodox lawmakers threatening to topple the government if a law excluding their community from conscription is not passed. By the way, Itamar Ben-Gvir is now back in the cabinet. Bezalel Smotrich, Netanyahu's finance minister and leader of the extremist religious Zionist party, was right all along when he assured the world that Netanyahu would resume the war in Gaza. On Tuesday, Smotrich said the hostage families had been heard too much during a clash at the Knesset with Ayala Metzger, the daughter-in-law of the slain captive Yoram Metzger. "We thought we were serving in the Israeli army, not the army of God's vengeance," she said. "In these very moments, we are murdering hostages, and there is a deal on the table." But for the religious Zionists, who now form the single most powerful group in Israel, the army of God's vengeance is exactly what the campaign in Gaza is all about. They've done everything in their power to make a dispute over land into a religious war. For years, they've pushed police to attack worshippers at Al-Aqsa Mosque during Ramadan, directly prompting the Hamas attack of the 7th of October 2023, which the group dubbed Operation Al-Aqsa Flood. Even the bitterest of foes can agree to stop fighting during religious festivals. But Israel, on Tuesday morning, did not just renege on a ceasefire deal it had signed. It specifically targeted worshippers gathered to perform a religious ritual. Despite its actions on October the 7th, Hamas remains, in the view of most military analysts, a disciplined militia that sticks to the agreements it signs. Even before Tuesday's attack, Israel had killed more than 150 Palestinians in Gaza during the ceasefire. It failed to start talks regarding Stage 2 on the 16th day of Stage 1, as prescribed in the deal. It failed to fulfill its commitment to withdraw from the Philadelphia corridor. It delayed the release of Palestinian prisoners for a week. Israel has behaved like a mafia, attempting to bully Gaza into a different deal altogether. It formulated a proposal which it put into the mouth of Steve Witkoff, although there was no word of endorsement from Trump's envoy himself, and demanded that Hamas release 11 living hostages and half of the dead in return for a 50-day ceasefire. This would have been a completely different deal from the one negotiated by Qatari and Egyptian mediators over months. Hamas is not Hezbollah and has a strong institutional collective identity in which leaders are quickly replaced. Even the attack on Hezbollah's leadership had no known effect on the ability of its field commanders and fighters to resist Israel's ground invasion and to peg Israel's elite forces to within a few kilometers of the border. Hamas has no known problems with recruitment and can replace fighters quicker than they are killed by the Israeli army, so a resumption of the war will likely not represent a killer blow to the organization as a whole, nor will it, on current evidence, change the determination of Palestinians in Gaza to stay on their land. The Ramadan massacre failed to make any dent on the front pages of the Western media, and in Israel, the media described all the dead, including the children, as members of Hamas. Europe and UK, so keen to defy Trump's developing plan to carve up Ukraine with the Russian President Vladimir Putin, are doing absolutely nothing to stop the slaughter in Gaza. Indeed, for the British Prime Minister Sir Keir Starmer, Gaza is emerging as a rite of passage essential for his aspiration to become a global statesman. At two major junctions since the October the 7th attack, Starmer defied the opinions of even right-wing members of his cabinet. In the first instance, Starmer refused to publicly apologise for his LBC interview with Nick Ferrari, in which he clearly said Israel had the right to withhold water and electricity from Gaza. He eventually issued a clarification, saying he was answering a previous question about Israel's right to defend itself. In the second instance, Starmer turned against his own kitchen cabinet, including such figures as Philippe Sands and Richard Hermer, both jurists committed to the sanctity of international law. They are also Jewish. The prevailing view among Starmer's closest advisors is that opposition to Israel's actions is driven by anti-Semitism, and Palestinian activism is a creature of the far left. This view persists to this day. On Tuesday, Starmer publicly overruled his foreign secretary after Lamy accused Israel of violating international law through the full imposition of a blockade which has cut water and electricity to over 2 million people in Gaza. Had Netanyahu not launched his surprise attack, Starmer would have welcomed Israeli Foreign Minister Gideon Saar to the UK with open arms. This was even after an Israeli minister had acted with contempt towards Emily Thornberry, the chair of the Parliament's Foreign Affairs Select Committee. Israel's Deputy Foreign Minister Sharon Haskell secretly filmed her and posted the footage on Instagram. Starmer's Britain is fully complicit in allowing Israel to commit genocide in Gaza. The sanctity of international law no longer means anything to the former barrister who made his name in human rights. But this is far from the end of the story, nor indeed the end of the story of Starmer's rise and fall from power. Neither Hamas, nor more importantly the Palestinians of Gaza, are going to fade away quickly and conveniently. Gaza could yet prove to be for Starmer what the Iraq War proved to be for his guide and mentor Tony Blair, the coup de grace of his premiership. Both Labour leaders have used a war in a Muslim country as a show of political cojones. Both believed that warmongering meant automatic entry into the elite club of world leaders. But for Starmer, as for Blair, war could be his undoing. For whoever picks up the pieces from the rubble left by the Trump era, the West's role as the moral leader of the world is gone for good. It has willfully abrogated that role at the cost of thousands of more Palestinian and Muslim lives.